Okay. Hey, everybody. We're here. It's Gennie and Hannah. We're going to give you the week 7 legislative roundup. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. We're back. We're going to just real quickly go through a couple bills. I think we've already talked about, maybe one we haven't. And then we're going to talk about LEARNs the rest of the time because it kind of dominated this week. So starting off, the affirmative or anti-affirmative action bill that Dan Sullivan filed, it is still in committee. I think they pulled it to do some amendments. There was talk about having it in gross so that the public could read the amendments. I don't know what happened with that. No motion was made, so still kind of waiting. We'll check the state site to see if anything happened while we weren't looking. But anyway, the library bill passed out of the Senate. This is another one of Dan Sullivan's bills. And he came out pretty strong anti-public institutions altogether. And then another bill, I think we talked about it a few weeks ago. It's a anti-woke business bill, specifically dealing with banks that we use for public funds. As of right now, it is still in committee. They're still trying to amend it. John Payton, who is a co-sponsor of the bill, was one of the people who asked for it to be pulled for more amendments because he actually took the time to read it during committee.
Can I say something about that? If anyone is surprised, like, why would there be a legislator that doesn't know what's in their bill? It's because a lot of these bills that they run, including the bill that Hannah is talking about, is a template that's used, across the country in different state legislatures, and is this one in particular pushed by groups like the Heritage Foundation and Arleg, who want to de-wokeify state institutions, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And it was amended to where our public retirement systems are no longer incorporated into, but still, they don't have a fiscal impact statement. They don't have any information about like what this will actually do. So I don't know if they're going to try to push it again or if they're going to just keep amending it until, it's a completely different bill. We'll see what happens. And then the public housing work requirement bill passed as well.
Wow.
Bad news. And then I think this is one we haven't talked about, but the Senate just passed an election bill out that would prohibit election drop boxes for absentee voting. And just to preface this, it's not something that we do really in Arkansas. A couple counties set up drive-by drop-offs in 2020. I believe Pulaski County did that, but it's not really something that we do. Of course, the narrative is we have to secure our elections and make sure no one's messing with our ballots.
I also have an aside on this one. I told Hannah earlier that I only concentrated on LEARNs this week and don't remember anything else that happens. And now that we're talking, it has apparently jogged my memory. But I will say I watched that one when it ran in Senate initially, and the argument for needing this bill for election integrity is because these drop boxes that we don't actually have are creating voter fraud. And somebody on state agencies, I think it was Senator Tucker, asked the bill sponsor, Senator Dees, like, how can there be fraud for something that doesn't exist? And it was this really strange exchange where he was like essentially saying, I believe in my heart that it's happening. So we need, and it was a really wonky, kind of nonsensical presentation. And then we found, somebody told us, a follower on Twitter later on, that that there's rankings provided for states based on election integrity. And, we say integrity with air quotes because that's often code for really just limiting who has access to the ballot box. And one of these national groups will rank states based on their voter integrity, bills and laws, and we dropped a few spots. Apparently we were like high up, and we dropped maybe like, we went from like 3 to 6. And so now there's this flood of all of these random election bills framed as election integrity, and none of them are applicable. I mean, I shouldn't say none of them. A lot of them are not applicable, or they're just kind of head scratchers, because we have some of the highest and tightest voter suppression laws in the country, and the lowest voter turnout almost. So they're just really trying to get us back up on that spot.
Yeah. I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, it's all good. Anyway, the last thing I just want to mention is Senate Bill 199, which is the anti-trans healthcare bill. It has passed through the Senate, and it is now in the House, and it will be heard in judiciary at some point, probably next week.
Sweet.
And now we're moving on, all about Learns.
To the main event. Yeah, it was opening day, opening season for the Learns Act, which, if you need a jog of memory, that is the Sanders administration's kind of signature legislative, her legislative agenda for this session, is to pass bold, transformational, conservative education reform. And so we had 6+ weeks of this kind of messaging, jingle rhetoric from her administration, and then from her cheerleaders in the House and the Senate who were on board with this. But it was really a tight circle of people who actually knew what was in the bill. It was the Senate sponsor, Brian Davis, and we can presume the administration, and then whomever was writing the bill with them. And really, there were few other people who knew anything of the bill's details. And that was reported to us repeatedly, week after week, that Republicans had not seen the bill. And so it was really a tight knit circle. And so that's kind of a theme of what we're going to talk about with Learns, is the process of how it unfolded. We had been waiting, like we said, 6+ weeks, and then it was dropped on Monday. It was filed at 4:50ish, 4:45 p.m., just kind of barely making the window in order to get on the calendar and give the public, I guess, 40-ish hours before it ran in committee, which was Wednesday morning. And yeah, I mean, things got wild as soon as it got filed. And from what we understand, there were drafts circulated on Monday afternoon to Democratic legislators. I don't know when Republican legislators were able to see drafts of this, but we heard testimony from Senate committee members today on the floor that some committee members or members of the Senate had copies as early as last Friday, but Democrats were intentionally not included in that and did not receive a copy of it until Monday. So some partisan politics playing out there. And one thing I want to point out is just the contrast between the bill sponsor, Senator Brian Davis, repeatedly saying in committee during her presentation of the bill that this was an open, transparent, and collaborative process across the board. There was a lot of strong rhetoric about how this was, a back and forth flow, exchange of ideas and information among stakeholders like public school teachers and administrators and legislators that had weighed in, and public input. But like we said, all we had heard for over 6 weeks was really nothing. These lawmakers on the Republican side who are well seasoned and pragmatic and uphold those classic values of fiscal responsibility and due diligence and proper vetting of, legislative policy. And a lot of them expressed that during this week, saying like, we need more time. This is not enough time to digest this much policy, this much information. I mean, they take a long time to go through very short legislation. As Hannah noted, we have been talking about some of these bills for weeks now, yet this is the largest package that we have seen. And according to Senator Flowers on the floor today, like, this is unprecedented. There has never been an omnibus style bill like this in the legislature before. This is kind of DC style politics. And to her point, she mentioned that this is intentional. It's intentional because it forces members to vote on everything if they like something, they feel trapped, they feel forced into voting for it. And that guarantees that these other policies that are really not good are going to pass anyway. And that goes for Republicans and Democrats. There are plenty of Republicans who do not support components of this bill, like school voucher expansion. And so that came up in committee time and time again. Senator Kim Hammer really did a great job of kind of going page by page, line by line with his questions. I mean, it was arduous, but that's meaningful. And that also demonstrated that that was not done prior to it running in committee. It wasn't just the first time the public was seeing it. It was really the first time legislators could vet it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, really, I've been getting paid to cover the legislature since 2018, in some form or fashion. And I have never once seen like the Senate be so like, we'll just get it done on the House side. Like to me, that still blows my mind. Like that narrative is not something that I'm used to. Normally they're fighting with each other, trying to get like their idea done and then sending it and then having the conversations. Well, just that's the normal process of like any bill that's ran. And for them to just like continue to push through in such a hard, like steadfast way, it really baffles me.
Well, and that's just politicking, right? Like that's not actually what they're trying to do. They're trying to get it passed because it's Governor Sanders's main thing. I mean, she included it in her State of the Union response. And so like, hey, y'all, she said that how many weeks ago? This is what she's talking about on all of the, national pundit shows. So the legislature has to deliver, and that is Breanne Davis. And Breanne Davis is going to have to convince a body of colleagues, including people in her own caucus, why they shouldn't wait. And that's the really interesting part, is to be able to observe as the public the tensions and the frustrations, even within the Republican Party, and kind of the disagreement on how to do this properly with this bill. And I think that's a good segue to our next talking point on LEARNs, is kind of the surprises that were in it. Another talking point for the governor's administration and for Senator Davis was that there are no surprises in this bill. I know that the governor has had her staff busy trying to correct people on Twitter who were not wrong. People have said like, hey, we don't actually know the details. All you guys did was talk about it in the State of the Union. And then we had a press conference and there was a poster, and that's fair. That is accurate. And then later on, there was kind of this like 8-page outline or Cliff's Notes kind of chat. It looked like a chapter introduction for a book, table of contents, I guess, of what was in the bill, but it obviously was 8 pages instead of 144. So one could presume there was a lot more policy that was left out. And all that to say, there were surprises. Surprise, like who would have thought? And we covered some of those on the blog on 4arpeople.org. A biggie in there, and this came up in committee, is that students who apply with vouchers to private schools can get kicked out and lose their spot in the voucher program if they have low academic performance, or if they have low any standard that the private school deems as subpar. That's a biggie. So that asks a lot of questions about, hey, what happens to those funds? Does it transfer back to the school? Does it stay with the private school? Could this be like a grift opportunity for private schools? And accreditation for private schools as well. Senator Leding brought this up in committee. You have a 4-year process where you can get accredited as a private school. So in theory, one could go out, start a private school tomorrow, apply for accreditation, get in the queue for that process, go to the state of Arkansas and say, hey, I just applied as a private school. I'm going to teach whatever. I'm going to accept vouchers. And for up to 4 years, technically they could be receiving taxpayer funded money from the state of Arkansas to do who knows what. So lots of questions from legislators about the voucher program. And yes, it is a voucher program. There was also somebody on Twitter saying, hey, nowhere in the bill does it say vouchers. Oh my God, how stupid are you guys? And it's like, oh, we don't want to tell teachers that they're stupid. Like, we know a synonym when we see one. They're called educational freedom accounts or education freedom accounts, which is what other states have done. Speaking of which, we looked into New Hampshire, who has had universal vouchers for a time now. I don't know if they're universal, but they have a significant voucher program there. And this was another surprise in the bill, that those entities or vendors, as the language of the bill says, are the folks who facilitate the voucher program. So if you're going to have all these accounts and kids applying and disbursement of funds, like, you got to have somebody run it, right? In the bill, it says that vendor can take up to 5% of that money and keep it to run their program. And really, a vendor could be, who knows what the state of Arkansas is going to do for a vendor who they're going to contract with. In New Hampshire, they contract with one nonprofit, and that nonprofit disclosed an income of like $92 million for 1 year. I need to check that. I don't actually know off the top of my head if that number is right. I just remember thinking it was very high. And they have 7 employees, and every single employee earned over 6 figures, and their CEO or their president of the nonprofit earned close to somewhere in between $300,000 and $400,000 a year. So there is substantial money to be made by whatever vendor the state contracts with. And all of that is taxpayer funded. Someone is going to get wealthy off of vouchers in Arkansas. So that was a biggie.
Another component that, like, a surprise, I guess, because it wasn't there, is a lot of the talk in support of the LEARNS Act has revolved around, like, kids with disabilities need more options, and public schools are failing kids with disabilities. But then we get this bill, and nowhere does it specify anything to, like, it has nothing to do with kids with disabilities. The argument still is like, those kids will get the opportunity to go to a school that benefits them. But again, we're talking about private schools that don't have the same standards. So, like, I think, Gennie was talking about this before, kicking kids out based on whatever merits they do or don't have, that could greatly affect people with disabilities. And we heard that a lot in committee. A lot of people are concerned about that. And I am too. For a lot of reasons, but I do want to make it clear that, like, their argument, they're saying this will help kids with disabilities, but it's not true. Like, it might help a few. I'm not going to say it won't, but we need more. Public schools aren't failing kids with disabilities. The government's failing our public schools because they're not adequately giving teachers what they need to handle kids with disabilities. It takes a lot of effort. And I think another thing that was mentioned is, like, this, I don't know if you've talked about it yet, but, like, the merit-based pay, how does that translate to special ed teachers who you're teaching kids with developmental disabilities? Their test scores are not going to be the same as other students. There's just a lot of questions and, like, a lot of misinformation about this and how it will help people with disabilities, and it won't.
Yeah. And that was a really big surprise for teachers in particular, was that, okay, we have this $50,000 starting pay raise for beginning teachers, which is great. We love that. But then the bill removes the salary schedule. So the state determined schedule where districts have to implement, based on a teacher's experience level and their education level. It was this predetermined set that districts had to follow to guarantee that districts were paying teachers, at least a minimum per level of experience. They got rid of that. And they were like, well, we're going to empower local districts to decide. And then the question was like, well, what happens if a district is actually not paying teachers correctly, or like what they're worth? And then the response from Secretary Oliva, the Department of Education head, was like, well, we want to know about that. And Senator Chesterfield, to her credit, pointed out that, like, that's why we had them in the first place, because there were districts who were not paying teachers remotely near what they were worth. So that is why the state implemented the salary schedule, was to guarantee that districts would not be cheating teachers out of decent pay or living pay. So as much as we love 50,000, which means at least we know we're going to guarantee that, that means there's going to be veteran teachers who have been in the classroom for decades, even, who are maybe going to get bumped to 52,000 a year. So they're going to get a $2,000 raise, but then somebody who's fresh out of their master's program in teaching is going to make just $2,000 less. And that teacher is not going to be guaranteed a bump in pay. And that's problematic. And that is something that teachers are very upset about. They are very upset about it. So it removes that guarantee. It institutes this merit pay program, which allows teachers to be considered for up to $10,000 of a bonus a year based on this weird criteria that's like student performance. So like basically, are your kids performing well in tests? We can assume that maybe that's going to be one of the standards they use. There's a limited pot of money. Somebody pointed this out to us on Twitter today. Like, it doesn't mean that every teacher can actually get up to $10,000. If you do it and you allocate the funds that they have set aside, it means that only 4 teachers per district can be eligible for $10,000. So then you're talking about a really cutthroat environment for our public school teachers. They do not need to be incentivized to teach our kids well. They already do that. You would be hard pressed to find another industry of professionals that are as committed to the work as public school teachers. And I will die on this hill. Like, if anybody wants to come for me on this, like, let's go, because no one works harder. It is so apparent. And when you say, now you can only get a bonus if you do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to treat you like you're, an intern in a Wall Street financial firm, that is so gross. Our schools are not businesses. Secretary Oliva said we're in the business of, the other day in committee, with as it pertains to schools. So there's all of this language. There's this push from, Senator Hester to like businessify schools. All of that is just going to create really acrimonious environments where teachers cannot lean on each other. They're going to be competing with one another for just like some basic pay that they're already entitled to. Wow, I had a lot of feelings on that.
No, I was like gonna throw something in, but you just kept going, and I was like, okay, Gennie.
I really have a lot of feelings about that.
Okay.
I also have a lot of feelings. About this. And this is the part that is not, they said the quiet part out loud in committee Wednesday. There are a lot of private schools that don't have open spots. A student by 2025, vouchers are technically open to everyone in the state. So say you're this family, you've been dying to go to this one school, you apply with a voucher, there's actually no spots. So you can't get into this school, but there's plenty of money for vouchers. Now they did say they're going to cap it so that the state's not going to spend money it doesn't have, which is great. We like that. But say that there's not actually any spots for students to move from public school to private school because those spots are already taken. This is the case in a lot of private schools in areas like mine in Northwest Arkansas. There's a wait list already. So who gets to apply for vouchers in that case? It's students who are already attending private school. And so that is literally taxpayers subsidizing families, giving them, forgiveness loans, to send their kids to school that they were already sending their kids to school, which one could infer, and this doesn't mean it's universal, but that could mean that these families could already afford it if they're already sending their kids there. Meanwhile, the families that can't afford it, that want to send their kids there, are not going to be able to get in. So that's why we call it a scam, because in that case, it really is only benefiting families that can already afford private school, and families, kids with disabilities, or who live in areas where they don't have spots for private schools, or who actually don't have private schools, get left in the dust. Thoughts?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not obviously we're not huge fans of like using public funds for private schools. But specifically, like, private schools, You don't even have to be a certified teacher to teach at a private school, y'all. Like that's wild. That's wild. Um, and I'm not saying like if you send your kid to a private school, that's fine, that's great, it's your prerogative. But we're gonna be sending these schools public funds when they're not even certifying their teachers.
Yeah, all the red tape that we've thrown on public schools within the Learns bill itself is remarkable. Removing salary schedules, adding merit-based pay programs,
Well,
adding
and
all.
the merit-based pay in and of itself is wild because these people they're all for private and charter schools because they don't have the same restrictions that public schools have. But we're gonna base our public teacher or our public school teachers' pay on those same tests and those same things that you're against.
Yeah. And in addition to like, it's just like this blooming onion that keeps
I
unfolding.
know.
Layers get stinkier and stinkier as you get to the rotten core. Like on the outside, you're like, I don't know, maybe. And then you start peeling it back and it's really bad. And just like you were saying, Hannah, yeah, I don't know. I hesitate to harp too much on it being a scam because like I do think that there are people that this program actually benefits. And I think the Succeed Scholarship Program has served a purpose. I have friends who have students who use that scholarship program to get their kids who have special needs into the appropriate education settings for them to thrive. And like, that's great. I think that's amazing. What I don't think is great is using taxpayer dollars to subsidize families that can already afford private school. And it's just, I don't know. It's a really bad look. And, you know, there are case studies like what happened in Arizona. We have another blog post on that you can read from last week. Universal vouchers did not go well in Arizona. And now they're trying to undo it. And we're just going to create a mess for ourselves. And then there's the fiscal aspect of it, which was something that they talked about on Senate floor today, is like, hey, yeah, we can fund year one where we're expanding it out of, you know, kids with disabilities to like a little bit more criteria. And then like year two, we're going to expand it. And then like year three, like, whoa. And, you know, chair of joint budget, Jonathan Dismayne was like, yeah, to be honest, I don't know how we're going to pay for that. That number is completely unknown. And so like, I don't know. It's just, it's wild. It's wild, which again, all of these questions go back to how important it is that this bill is properly vetted, not just by legislators, but also by the public and by stakeholders and the people for whom this will impact most, which is public school educators. So many questions, but I will say that we knew it was going to pass the Senate. Like it had a lot of Senate co-sponsors. It did not pass. It passed in the Senate, but not every Republican voted for it. And I think that is significant and worth noting. There was some really good dialogue on the Senate floor today. It did feel a bit rushed on the Senate floor. I mean, granted, they had a pretty hefty schedule they had to get through. Today was Thursday. It was their last day of the week. They're always kind of cranky. And speaking of cranky, things got a little weird. As Hannah said, like, this is not popular. This is not popular with teachers. I haven't seen any polling done on this. I would love to, like, if somebody wants to give us money, we can do a poll. Or if somebody's doing a poll, like send it to us and show us. I would love to have a poll on Arkansans' reaction to this bill. And I would love to have a poll that also samples teachers, specifically public school teachers and administrators. In her presentation on Senate Education Committee on Wednesday, Senator Davis, I don't even really know how to describe it, like was very indignant and essentially hostile in her introduction to school administrators, and multiple times through the day accused them of intentionally misleading the public about the Learns Act. And we have a clip of that I think we're gonna show you.
They are misleading the public. They're misleading you. They're misleading their teachers at best, lying at worst.
And so after people got a feel for how Senator Davis seemed to really detest administrators, in particular, the reaction to this bill, It did not go well for her on social media. Now, please know that we don't think that social media is reflective in any way of the state of Arkansas. But it was not good. It was not good for her. It was a very bad look to throw administrators under the bus. And in addition to that, it got worse and worse for her. And by the end of the night, she was calling out those good folks at Star City and Two Rivers who brought their delegation of teachers to advocate against this bill, which is so fascinating because this bill would increase their teacher pay, and yet they were advocating against it because they know it's not what's best for their kids, as somebody said on the Senate floor today. She pulled the policy of one of these school districts and basically tried to say like, haha, the bill passed anyway, and you're out of compliance with your district's, handbook, employee handbook, which is just absolutely incredible.
So petty. So petty.
I mean, and not just petty, but like,
how else are they supposed to like talk to you?
Well, and like, yes. So rightfully so, the reaction was like, what else are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to get input? Like, of course they should be able to attend a public hearing on policy that's going to impact them. I was kind of looking at it from the lens of like, holy, like she is really abusing her power right now. Mm-hmm. Like you're gonna go after these rural districts, these people that like you just spent 5 hours saying how much you care about them and how you have their back and how you're for them. And you like tried so hard to make it seem like, and it felt genuine, but then when you turn around and do this, it's like, whoa, girl, whoa, you have overstepped. Somebody came in later and was like, hey, I'm a school board, or I'm like a lawyer for a school district. They're not out of compliance. They're good. So thankfully, it seems like administrators and teachers are cool. Like if you clear it with your district before you come, like there should not be a state senator basically threatening for you to lose your job. Like I want to make that very clear, like how abhorrent this behavior is. I am absolutely appalled.
And it's like, it's really disappointing to see this from Brianne Davis. Like obviously we have very different views on a lot of things, but like I have never seen her act like this in like the 3 or 4 year sessions that I've been covering. Like definitely have seen her get snappy, but not like this and not towards members of the public.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what have you been told by the governor? Like, what did you expect when you ran this bill, when you came out to be the sponsor? Like, did you think it was going to go well? Like, just be easy? Because that's not how it works ever.
And I'm obviously speculating. We like cannot know what's going on in these legislators' minds and hearts. But like, if I'm going to die on the hill of like, teachers are the hardest working people in this state and they don't need to be paid based on some like arbitrary merit system. Like, it seems like Learns is her bill or her hill that she's going to die on. Like, she's like, come hell or high water, this thing is getting run through. And like, I will run over anyone and I will bulldoze the exact people that I'm saying this bill is for, public educators, in the name of getting this thing done. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really remarkable. That's remarkable. It's fascinating. It's also really sad. It's sad for the state of Arkansas. Like, this isn't good for anybody. And I don't think it's good for Senator Davis either, at least from a reputation standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have a different view of her now.
Well, I think a lot of people on social media also do, Hannah, so I don't think you're alone. All this to say, there was a lot that happened. And as you can see, even just by our reactions and like, we're very progressive here at 4AR people, but we always try to look at things objectively. Obviously, we support policies that are best for most people in Arkansas, or that benefit the most people instead of just those at the top, which is why we don't like vouchers. But like, yeah, it was a stressful week, I think, for everyone, for the public, for legislators, for the governor's staff, who was like, they're like going off on Twitter and like attacking people. Like, somebody send them a cupcake. I don't know. Like, everybody needs a hug. Yeah. Or maybe not. Maybe you don't need a hug. Maybe you just need a stiff drink, or a vacation. But I will say that this is not over. This moves to the House, where there are actually a lot fewer people completely convinced that this is the best idea ever than there are in the Senate. So it's actually a really great opportunity for the public to reach out to members of the House Education Committee. We are expecting this bill to be run in that committee on Tuesday morning at probably 9 a.m. if they're going to kind of follow suit with what the Senate did. We also anticipate that that will be in the Big Mac building, which is the building just behind the Capitol, the west side of the Capitol. There's a main entrance there that's kind of directly across from the Capitol. And that room can accommodate a lot more people, which is what they did with Senate Education. So our good friends at Arkansas Strong and also partners of our work in the Pay AR Teachers Coalition, we're just partnering with them. Arkansas Strong is really taking the lead, but I believe there's going to be kind of a meetup. Educators who are coming from all across the state who want to make sure that their voice is heard, a la Two Rivers and Star City. I think they're asking people to wear their, school attire or their school colors, show your school pride, and get there early, I think 8 a.m. And then that way we can all, get oriented, especially folks who are coming in from out of town and need some figuring out of the legislative layout. But there will be plenty of people from the coalition there to help you get oriented and make sure that you get signed up to speak. If that's something you want to do, don't feel pressure to speak. If you are going to speak, please be aware that they're likely going to limit testimony to anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes, probably closer to 1 than 5. And so you really have to have a nice prepared 1-minute elevator pitch for why you do or don't like this bill. And it should be personal, it should be memorable, and you should practice. I think if teachers are listening, they'll know to do that. They're like the most prepared people ever. So that's happening. We wanted people to know about that. You can also go to our blog and read our posts about how to contact these public education committee members in the House. If you're contacting them by phone or email, please keep it personal and polite. And not super long, and make sure you share your personal experience or how this would impact you or why you're concerned for your particular school or community. Anything else?
I don't know. That sounds pretty good to me.
Okay, well,
that's all I can remember. Let's just put it that way.
Other things will happen next week in addition to Learns. And I am just really relying on Hannah to make sure he knows what those things are. Because,
yeah, we're still waiting on her cage bill.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait, which bill?
Well, okay, jails.
Yes, prison, criminal justice, which we've heard that that's actually split up. That's not an omnibus bill anymore. It's split up because they're afraid it's going to get challenged in court.
Some other news outside of the legislature, but still politics. Tim Griffin, the AG, has signed on with a few other AGs from different states to try to end DACA.
Oh, that's so bad.
It's really bad.
We love you, DACA recipients. Home is here.
We do. And at the rally today, someone who works with the ACLU, who's also a DACA recipient, got up and spoke about it. And I really thought his speech was probably the best of everyone, not to diminish anyone, but I don't know, it's a really concerning, and I think the way that he presented it was really well, because when you do that, you're removing teachers, you're removing nurses, nurses who work throughout COVID. We're losing, we're all of these people and potentially sending them to a place that they've never actually lived or don't remember being there. So that's another thing that's happening in Arkansas news. Just throwing that out there. The rally was good. It was a good time. I think the speakers were great. Appreciate everyone who put that together. But yeah, just other things to keep your eyes on.
Okay. Until next time. Hydrate.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.